Growing up, I was always the black sheep of the Parker family. While my siblings thrived under our parents' watchful eyes, straight A's, varsity sports, Ivy League ambitions, I was the kid with paint-stained fingers and a sketchbook full of dreams. My name's Jake Parker, and if you'd asked anyone in our small Ohio town who was least likely to succeed, they would have pointed right at me. My older brother Brandon was the golden boy. Football star, business major, groomed since birth to take over our family's legacy. Parker and Sons Construction. My sister Emily was the brainiac, off to med school before she turned 23. And then there was me, the art school dropout. From a young age, my ideas were too loud, too messy, too out there for the Parkers. While my father hammered home the importance of discipline and tradition, I was more interested in designing treehouses or painting murals around the neighborhood. My parents didn't understand it. "That's not a real job," Dad would scoff. "Grow up and find something practical." I did try for a while. I enrolled in business classes at community college just to make them happy, but my heart wasn't in it. I ended up dropping out and moving to the city with barely $200 and a sketch pad. They were furious. They called it a betrayal. My mom even said I'd embarrassed the family name. Years passed. I struggled, bounced between freelance gigs, waiting tables, couch surfing. But eventually, I found my rhythm. I started a graphic design company out of my tiny studio apartment. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And it was growing. Meanwhile, back home, things were falling apart. I didn't know it yet, but Brandon wasn't the businessman Dad thought he'd be. And Parker and Sons, well, the and Sons part was about to change forever. It all started with a call I almost didn't answer. It was Emily. "Jake," she said, her voice low, "you need to come home." I hesitated. "Why?" "It's Dad," she said, "and the business. It's not what you think." I hadn't spoken to my father in almost 5 years, but something in her voice made me pause. Maybe it was concern. Maybe curiosity. Maybe, just maybe, it was the opportunity I never thought I'd get. And so I packed a bag, boarded a Greyhound, and headed back to the town that never believed in me. Little did they know, the black sheep was coming home. When the Greyhound finally pulled into my hometown station, everything looked the same, yet completely different. The same sleepy streets, the same rusted "Welcome to Cedar Hollow" sign. But somehow it all felt smaller now. Or maybe I had just grown. Emily was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against her car. When she saw me, her face lit up with a familiar warmth. She gave me a hug, tight, longer than expected. "You look different," she said with a half smile. "In a good way." I laughed. "You look like someone who's about to drop a bomb on me." She didn't laugh. "Jake," she said, "Dad had a stroke. It happened last week." I stopped cold. "What?" "He's okay, physically, but he's not the same. The doctors say he might not be able to work again. And Brandon, he's in way over his head." I blinked. "What do you mean?" She exhaled. "Come see for yourself." We drove straight to the office of Parker and Sons. The sign was weathered, the paint peeling, the parking lot half empty. I stepped inside and felt an immediate heaviness, like walking into the ghost of a place that once held so much pride. The lobby was cluttered, outdated. A receptionist gave me a puzzled look before Emily whispered something to her. We moved down the hall toward Dad's old office. When we stepped inside, my heart sank. There he was, my father. Once a towering, no-nonsense man who barked orders like a drill sergeant, now slumped in a chair, staring blankly at a file he wasn't really reading. He looked up. His eyes landed on me, and something flickered. Recognition, maybe? "Jake," he murmured, "didn't think I'd see you again." His voice was weaker than I remembered, but there was no bitterness, no scolding, just defeat. "Hi, Dad," I said, my voice catching in my throat. "I came when I heard." He nodded slightly. "You always were the stubborn one." Emily gently touched his shoulder. "Why don't you rest, Dad? We'll talk later." We stepped outside and she led me to the conference room. "That's not the worst of it," she said. "Brandon's been trying to run things since Dad's stroke, but he's bad at it. Really bad." I raised an eyebrow. I thought Brandon was the golden boy. Emily gave a bitter laugh. That's what we all thought. Turns out he's in debt. He borrowed against the company to fund a second office, and it failed. Now we've got unpaid invoices, angry clients, and barely enough cash to make payroll. I sat down hard. Jesus, she nodded. I didn't know who else to call. You're the only one who ever had a creative brain in this family. I stared at her. I'm not a miracle worker, Em. I haven't run a construction business before. No, she said, but you know how to fix things. And you see problems differently. That's what this place needs. Just then, the door burst open. Brandon walked in, his face flushed. What the hell is he doing here? He snapped, pointing at me. Emily didn't flinch. We need help, Brandon scoffed. From him? The dropout? The joke? I stood up slowly. Nice to see you too, Brandon. He took a step forward, puffing up his chest. You've got no stake here, no experience, no say in what happens to this company. Neither do you, Emily cut in sharply. Not anymore. He glared at her. What's that supposed to mean? She reached into her bag and dropped a thick envelope on the table. Dad signed over power of attorney to me last night. He knows he can't run the business anymore, and he's done watching you ruin everything he built. Brandon's face turned pale. I leaned forward. Here's the deal. I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to fix what's broken. But if you keep getting in the way, you'll have no company left to inherit. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard a framed certificate fell off the wall. I looked at Emily. So, where do we start? She smiled. With the truth, and maybe a new logo. I laughed despite everything. That night, I stayed up in my old bedroom, now used as storage, and laid out plans. I started sketching ideas, researching the client base, and listing every unpaid invoice. It was a mess. But for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt since leaving home. Purpose. And I wasn't about to waste it. I woke up the next morning to the sound of hammers and heavy machinery outside my window. Same old construction yard sounds, but they hit differently now. This wasn't just noise. It was the sound of something that used to belong to my family. And maybe, just maybe, could again. I sat up on the creaky twin bed in my old childhood room, still painted navy blue, the wallpaper peeling in one corner, and stared at the whiteboard I'd propped up on my desk the night before. It was filled with notes, numbers, and ideas. One word was circled in red in the center. Rebuild. Downstairs, Emily was already up, coffee in hand, reviewing payroll spreadsheets at the kitchen table. Morning, she said without looking up. We're short $14,200 for Friday's payroll. Awesome, I said, pouring myself a cup of probably too old Folgers. Add that to the things Brandon screwed up list. She cracked a tired smile. We drove to the office together, where the crew was already at work. Some of them looked surprised to see me. One guy, Frank, an older foreman I remembered from high school, nodded politely but warily. In the conference room, we met with the department heads. Brandon wasn't there. No one asked why. Okay, I started, pacing slowly in front of the room. Let's not sugarcoat this. We're in trouble. A few people exchanged nervous glances. But we're not dead, I continued. We've got skilled labor, a respected name, barely hanging on, and clients who still want our work. If we can prove we can deliver. Easier said than done, Frank muttered. True, I replied, but here's how we start. I laid out a 3-step plan. 1. Collect unpaid invoices. I'd already drafted emails and call scripts to follow up with overdue clients. 2. Cut waste. I had spotted at least 6 subscriptions and service fees bleeding our account. 3. Rebrand the business. New logo, updated website, and a digital presence. Something we never had before. But Jake, another manager said, you haven't even been around. What makes you think you know what's best? I don't, I admitted, but I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to work. And I care about saving this place, not because it's perfect, but because it can be. Silence. Then Frank nodded slowly. Let's do it. That afternoon, I sat with Dad again. He wasn't talking much, mostly staring at the television. But when I told him about the meeting, he blinked slowly and gave the faintest nod. It was enough. By Friday, we'd collected over $8,000 in overdue payments. I called in a favor from an old college buddy who ran a web design firm. He agreed to build us a new website, free of charge. Emily and I stayed up past midnight balancing the books. It still wasn't enough, so I did something I hadn't told her. I called the one person I swore I never would. "Uncle Don," I said, swallowing my pride, "I need a short-term loan." He laughed. "Didn't your dad say you'd never amount to anything?" "Yeah, well, I'm trying to prove him wrong." After a long pause, he said, "You've got guts, kid. Come see me Monday." By Monday afternoon, the $15,000 was in our account. I told the team we'd make payroll, and we did. But things were far from smooth. Brandon came storming into the office the next day, red-faced and furious. "I heard you took a loan from Uncle Don? Who gave you permission?" "Dad did," Emily replied calmly, pulling out the signed documents. "And as acting power of attorney, I approved it." "You're destroying everything," he shouted. "No," I said quietly. "We're saving it. You just don't like that you're not in control anymore." He lunged at me, but Frank stepped in between us. "Enough." Brandon looked around, saw no one coming to his defense, and stormed out. That night, I looked at the new logo my buddy had designed. It was simple. Parker & Sons, built to last. Clean font, bold lines, a foundation beneath it. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe I didn't want to fix the company just to prove something. Maybe, just maybe, I wanted to build something better than what we had before. The next few weeks were a blur of long hours, tight deadlines, and more coffee than any one human should consume. The office slowly transformed from a place of dread into something close to hopeful. We were still hanging on by a thread, but for the first time in a long time, that thread wasn't fraying. Frank came to me one morning with a thick folder under his arm. "You need to see this," he said, placing it on my desk. "What is it?" "Contracts Brandon signed the past 6 months. Unapproved change orders, unpaid invoices, materials billed but never delivered." He paused. "It's a mess." I opened the folder, scanning line after line of disaster. My stomach dropped. This was worse than we thought. "He's either completely incompetent," I muttered, "or he's stealing." "Maybe both." Emily joined us, her face pale. "There's more." I ran a credit check on the company's accounts. Someone opened a personal credit line using the business's name. "Guess who the primary user is?" "Brandon," I said. She nodded. "He's been using it to fund vacations, first-class flights, spa packages. One charge was for a luxury watch, $11,000. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. "We need to tell Dad." "He's not well enough," Emily said softly. "Then we tell the lawyer." That afternoon, we met with Mr. Halpern, the family attorney. After reviewing the documents, he leaned back in his chair, lips pressed into a thin line. "If this is true," he said, "Brandon has committed fraud and breached his fiduciary duty as co-owner." "Can we remove him?" I asked. "If your father signs the request, yes. With Emily's power of attorney, she could do it too. But I recommend letting your father make the decision." We drove straight to the hospital. Dad was sitting up, more alert than usual. Emily explained the situation gently, her voice calm but firm. I handed him the papers. "I trusted him," Dad murmured, eyes glassy. "I know," I said. "So did I. But we can fix this. With your signature, we can protect everything you built." He looked between us. Then, slowly, he picked up the pen and signed. It was official. Brandon was out. We filed the paperwork the next morning. That same day, the new website went live. We launched our first online ad campaign targeting mid-sized contractors and local developers. Emily drafted a newsletter for former clients, announcing the company's new direction under our leadership. 3 days later, we landed our first big contract, a $240,000 remodel of a historic downtown building. It wasn't just a win, it was the win. The team was buzzing. Frank shook my hand so hard I thought he might pull my arm off. Even the younger guys, who had been unsure about me at first, started calling me boss without sarcasm. That night, I stood outside the shop with Emily, watching the sun dip behind the city skyline. "You did it," she said. "No," I replied. "We did." There was a pause. "You know, I never told you this," she said, "but when Mom passed and everything got so tense, I always hoped you'd come back. I knew you were the only one who could fix this." I looked at her, surprised. I thought you saw me as the black sheep like everyone else. She smiled. I never did. You were just different. And maybe that's exactly what this place needed. We stood in silence for a while. And then, because every story needs a twist, the phone rang. It was a reporter. I'm doing a feature on local businesses bouncing back post-pandemic, she said. I heard about your company's turnaround. Mind if I ask a few questions? I blinked. Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk. The article came out 2 weeks later. It was titled, Black Sheep No More, How Jake Parker Saved His Family's Legacy. There was a photo of me standing in front of the Parker & Son sign, hard hat under one arm, smiling like I'd just climbed Everest. My old high school teacher emailed me. So did a couple of former coworkers from my failed startup. Even Uncle Don sent a text. Not bad for the black sheep. Drinks on me next time. But the best reaction? Dad's. He read the article 3 times. Then he called me, something he rarely did anymore, and said, You made me proud, son. That sentence meant more to me than any award, paycheck, or headline. Because the truth is, I never really wanted revenge or validation. I just wanted to build something that mattered, with people who mattered. And now, I finally was. The next few months were the busiest of my life, but also the most rewarding. Every day brought a new challenge, and I found myself thriving under pressure in a way I never had before. Emily and I fell into a rhythm. She handled client communications and contracts while I oversaw operations and project execution. Frank was our eyes and ears in the field, and the younger crew members began stepping up in ways we hadn't expected. We were no longer just surviving. We were growing. By September, we'd landed our 5th major contract, a full redesign and build of a medical center's new wing. It was a $1.2 million project, our biggest job yet. That one contract would cover nearly 6 months of payroll, materials, and overhead, with a sizable profit left over. And yet, even with all that success, something still lingered in the background. Brandon. After we removed him from the company, he disappeared, for a while. But trouble always has a way of circling back. One Friday morning, as I was reviewing blueprints in the office, Emily walked in holding a letter. She looked pale. Jake, she said, placing the envelope on my desk, it's from Brandon's attorney. I opened it slowly, my stomach already in knots. He was suing us. More specifically, he was suing me, claiming I had manipulated our father during a moment of medical weakness, coerced him into signing the ownership transfer documents, and unlawfully removed Brandon from the company. He wants compensation, I muttered, reading the fine print. $2 million for emotional distress and lost earnings. Emily sat down across from me. He's delusional. Yeah, but delusional people can still cause a lot of damage. We immediately contacted Mr. Halpern, our family lawyer. After reviewing the case, he shook his head. This is flimsy, he said, but if it goes to court, it'll get messy. He's counting on you settling. Not a chance, I said firmly. Emily nodded in agreement. Let him drag us to court. He'll be the one exposed. The weeks that followed were brutal. Brandon's lawyers sent a flurry of legal threats, and a few local blogs picked up on the family business feud, posting exaggerated headlines like, Bitter Brother Booted from Building Empire. We lost a couple of small clients who didn't want the publicity, but most stayed. And then, in a twist none of us saw coming, our best defense came from Dad. Though his health had declined, he insisted on giving a recorded deposition. I may be old, he said into the camera, but I'm not senile. I signed those papers because I wanted Jake to run the company. He earned it. He saved it. And Brandon, well, Brandon ran it into the ground. That video changed everything. Brandon's legal team backed off within a week, and the lawsuit was quietly dropped. But the damage was done. Not to us, but to him. A week later, I heard from a mutual contact that Brandon had been blacklisted by several local contractors. Turns out word gets around fast when you threaten your own family to cash out of a business you nearly sank, and while he sulked in silence, we kept building. In December, we hosted our first holiday party in the newly renovated office space. Clients, vendors, crew, and their families filled the room. There were string lights hanging from the rafters, a buffet spread from a local BBQ joint, and even a makeshift photo booth that Emily insisted on setting up. Frank, usually the grumpiest guy on the crew, wore a Santa hat, and passed out bonus checks like candy. At one point during the night, I found myself outside, leaning against the railing of the upstairs balcony. Snow was starting to fall, gently coating the parking lot below. Dad rolled up beside me in his wheelchair, a cup of cider in his hand. "Not bad," he said, looking out at the happy crowd inside. "Not bad at all." I chuckled. "You ever think we'd get here?" He shook his head. "I thought we were done. Thought the Parker legacy would end with me." "Well," I said, "it's just getting started." He turned and looked at me. Really looked at me. "I was hard on you," he said. "Always compared you to Brandon. Called you irresponsible, said you'd never amount to much." "You weren't wrong," I said with a smile. "Back then, anyway." He smirked. "You grew up." "I had to." There was a pause. Then he added, "I'm proud of you, Jake." I don't say it enough, but I am. That sentence meant everything. I didn't need a spotlight. I didn't need a parade. I just needed that. That night, as the snow fell and the laughter inside grew louder, I finally realized something. I wasn't the black sheep anymore. I was the shepherd now, guiding the flock forward, building a future on the bones of the past, and I was ready for whatever came next. 6 months passed, and in that time, I learned more about leadership, legacy, and loyalty than I had in my entire life. Parker & Sons Construction wasn't just back on its feet, it was thriving. We expanded our crew from 12 to 35 employees. We picked up commercial contracts with the city, even had a feature in a regional business magazine titled "The Comeback Kid: How a Black Sheep Saved a Family Legacy." I never imagined I'd see my face in a magazine. My high school teachers probably wouldn't have either. Emily framed a copy and hung it in the office right above our new mission statement. "We build more than structures. We build second chances." It wasn't just a catchy slogan, it was my truth. I'd taken every insult, every doubt, every "you'll never amount to anything," and turned it into steel, sweat, and success. But despite all that growth, there was one more thing left unfinished. My family. Not the business side of it. The real side. My relationship with Mom. She'd kept quiet through most of the drama. Never stepped in when Brandon spiraled. Never defended me when I was dismissed. Always on the sidelines, silent. But silence cuts deeper than words sometimes. One Sunday morning, I stopped by her place. No warning. Just showed up with coffee and a box of cinnamon rolls from her favorite bakery. She opened the door, surprised but not unhappy. "Jake," she said softly. "Hey, Mom," I replied. "Mind if I come in?" She stepped aside and we sat at the kitchen table like we used to, before life got messy. I told her everything. About the lawsuit, about Dad's confession, about how it felt to finally be seen. She listened. Really listened. And when I was done, she wiped at her eyes and whispered, "I'm sorry I didn't speak up. I always thought Brandon needed more support. I didn't realize how much you needed it too. I didn't expect an apology, but it helped. Forgiveness is tricky. It doesn't erase the past, but it makes the future lighter." We talked for hours, and for the first time in years, I felt like her son again, not just the afterthought in the shadow of the perfect child. A few weeks later, she came to one of our job sites, wearing a hard hat that was way too big for her and boots she clearly borrowed. She hugged me in front of the whole crew and said, "I'm proud of you, Jake. I really am." Some of the guys whistled. Frank pretended to cry. I just laughed. Yeah, that moment meant more than any contract. Fast forward to now. It's been 2 years since I took over Parker & Sons. Dad's health has stabilized. He comes by the office twice a week, mostly to give unwanted advice and steal snacks from the break room. Emily is now not just my business partner, but my fiancée. I proposed on the roof of our biggest project to date, a downtown library restoration that's now one of the crown jewels of our portfolio. And Brandon? Last I heard, he's working in a different state. Tried to start his own company. Didn't last long. I don't wish him harm, but I don't miss him either. Sometimes karma doesn't roar, it whispers. And in Brandon's case, it whispered truth and consequences. Looking back, I understand why I was called the black sheep. I was different. I didn't follow the script. I questioned the rules. I failed. I messed up, but I also grew. And growth, that uncomfortable, unglamorous, uncelebrated kind of growth, is what separates the black sheep from the wolves. I stopped trying to earn a seat at their table. I built my own. And now, that table is full, with clients, coworkers, family, and people who never gave up on me. So if you've ever been doubted, if you've ever been dismissed, if they've ever called you the black sheep, just remember, wolves don't lose sleep over the opinions of sheep. And black sheep? Sometimes they come back and buy the whole damn farm.